Greetings, everyone. My name is Patricia Kubo. I'm a professor in educational policy at Indiana University, Bloomington campus. I also have a joint appointment with the Department of Curriculum Instruction, as well as Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. And I'm happy and pleased to be able to welcome you to our 5th annual symposium, which is titled Advancing Education in Muslim Societies, Implications for Policy, Pedagogy, and Development. We had a very competitive process of proposals. So what you'll be seeing over the next 3 days from noon to 3 o'clock will be the best of the best, the cream of the crop of presentations and proposals that came in to us. So welcome to everyone. I also wanted to mention that in a few moments, we'll be able to hear welcoming remarks, opening comments from our 2 institutions that are part of this partnership. So this symposium is a partnership between IU School of Education and also the International Institute of Islamic Thought, which we call IIT for short. And this partnership is organized by a number of conference people that we'll introduce in a moment, will introduce themselves. But I did want to give a welcome and a thank you to Dr. Ahmed Alwani from IIT, who will be giving remarks in a moment, as well as to my own dean, Dean Staci Maroni, who's Dean of IU School of Education for our Bloomington campus. So thank you very much to our institutional heads, which seems appropriate under this first session, which is on educational leadership, teacher reflection, refugee integration, for them to be part of this. So thank you very much. I would like to follow now with Ilham Nasser, my partner in crime, so to speak, my co-symposium organizer. She will introduce herself and we will let you know who are the people that have been involved in putting this together. Go ahead, Ilham.
Thank you, Patty, and welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm sure you're happy to see all the faces behind the multiple emails and correspondence we've been having for so many months. We are so excited here at IIT to be having this event, and it's our 5th annual event in partnership with Indiana University. So I'm Ilham Nasser. I'm the director of the Human Development Program, and I'm also senior researcher carrying some of the empirical research we do here at IIT and part of the Advancing Education in Muslim Societies initiative. So welcome, and I would like to introduce you to Saulat, who is our 4th member of the planning team. And Saulat, you're on.
Sure.
Welcome again.
Welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I am Saulat Pervez, associate researcher at the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIT. I'm excited to be here and look forward to all the presentations and interaction. You'll find me in the chat. If you guys need anything, let me know.
Okay, and now to Daria.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daria Doğan. A lot of you have already received several emails from me, so I was a troublemaker, sending you all those nonstop emails. I'm a double major PhD candidate in education policy studies and Middle Eastern languages and cultures with a research focus in comparative Islamic education. It's a great pleasure to finally have you all join us today. Before the welcome remarks, I would like to remind you all that other than the session presenters, we will have everyone else keep their videos and microphones off. Also, we kindly ask you not to use the hand raising function. However, you are strongly encouraged to post your questions and comments in the chat box. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Staci Maroni for her welcome remarks. She is the Dean of School of Education at Indiana University, Bloomington. Dean Maroni, the Zoom floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be here. I am actually in Washington, D.C. right now. And you might think, palm trees don't really make sense in Washington, D.C. I'm joining from the University of Arizona's facility here in D.C., having just wrapped up a meeting. So I'm delighted to be here. Dr. Kubo asked me to just give a few remarks as a welcome, say a little bit about the School of Education before we turn it over to the excellent sessions that you're going to have throughout the symposium. So I first want to acknowledge our appreciation for our partnership with IIIT in putting together this important symposium. They remain wonderful partners, and this is a truly exciting day that this symposium is about to kick off. Dr. Kubo asked me to talk a little bit about the importance of international educational research in the school and the value of cross-cultural learning and sharing. And so I have a few slides, actually a number of them, but I'll move through them quickly, I promise. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hope that this goes, that this works out well. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Hopefully you can now see this. I'm going to just move this window. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Again, welcome to the symposium. What you see here is just a brand new shot of the School of Education on the Bloomington campus of Indiana University. We just put together some brand new banners that honor some of our alumni. And so what you see here in this example is Maria Mercedes Mansaba, who was our first known international graduate who earned a Bachelor of Arts from the School of Education. So we have a variety of banners that are throughout the grounds of our, as you enter our building, which is very exciting to honor both international alums as well as other alums. So in the School of Education, and international engagement is a key focus for us. So we encourage students along these 3 bullets that you see to become globally aware citizens, to build pathways to peace and mutual understanding, and to promote the power of education to facilitate development. This is kind of a nice map, and you can actually get to this at the URL that you see on the screen, and you can actually click on each of the locations to learn more. But here are some of the areas in which we engage in international research. So it's worth taking a look when you have a moment. We also have an International Student Ambassadors Program. This is new. And the idea was that we have students who are both from the US and also around the globe who are offered to be international student ambassadors. So they represent different areas, academic backgrounds. And so what incoming students can do to help kind of acclimate to IU is they can take a look at our student ambassadors, learn a little bit more about them, and then fill out the contact form that you see there, which would then allow them to connect directly with actual students who can share their experiences with our students as a way to help guide them in their transition to IU. This is new, and I think it's going to be, it's already proving to be quite successful. I also wanted to acknowledge just a few people. Laura Stakowski is the director of our Global Gateway for Teachers program. This is a nationally recognized cultural immersion program that's recognized for some of the most rigorous and innovative professional activities available for our students. So on the next slide, we were very thrilled to receive the Senator Paul Simon Nafsa Award for campus internationalization. We were just one of 3 universities in the United States to be honored with an award for this program. Here are some of the areas that are overseas. We have an urban program as well as a Navajo Nation program. These are the overseas programs that where we have students placed. And so there's quite a few of them, and you'll see that there's an asterisk next to Germany. This is brand new for us, and in next year, actually in February, this will be our first exchange program with the University of Hamburg. So we will be bringing students from Germany over in February as part of this exchange program. And then Laura and I will travel to the University of Hamburg in March to participate in a week-long institute. Of course, we also remain active in the IU gateways. You see them there in Bangkok, Beijing, Berlin, Mexico City, and New Delhi. So we remain active despite the pandemic. Here's some of our partnerships, and some of them are now completed, and others are still underway. We have two with Beijing Normal. One was just completed in 2019, and the other one, the Center for Teacher Education Research, is currently underway. And of course, you see that the University of Hamburg is just starting out. Now, it started in 2020, but we will have it will actually kick off in 2022. So you see some of our partnerships there. Another person that is really important that I just wanted to recognize is Aveska Dimitrievska, who is our Global Education Initiatives Coordinator. So Vesna is everywhere. She developed a dual language immersion program to promote global mindedness and global competencies for students, pre-service and in-service teachers and faculty members. So Vesna is on the road all the time, giving workshops all over the state for a variety of audiences, and is really important to our international efforts. And then, of course, you all know our wonderful Dr. Kubo, longtime advocate for educational research and work in Middle Eastern countries, including research on various aspects of citizenship education for Syrian refugees in Jordan. And finally, just to recognize another person, this is one of our PhD students in science education, Shukoff Rothman. She is studying education for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh and decolonizing predominantly Western-oriented approaches to educational research, while highlighting and honoring the unique lived experiences of underrepresented populations in Afghanistan. So she is one of several students that are deeply committed to international education. So just a little bit more, and then I will turn it back over to Dr. Kubo. I thought you might be interested in our enrollment. So at the master's level, we see a little bit of a dip. The gold-colored bars are our international students, and we had a slight dip going into the current year, which we believe is due to the pandemic. So, but the good news is on the PhD front, despite the pandemic, our numbers are continuing to rise. So you see from 2020 to 2021 that we've shown an increase in our PhD enrollments at the international level. And while our enrollments are small, they're growing in the EDD area. So, and again, the trend is upward, which is good news for us. And we have small numbers of undergraduate international students right now. And again, we believe that some of this dip was due to the pandemic, and we expect to return to numbers that are closer to what we saw in 2018 and 19. And finally, this is a panoramic view of our atrium within the School of Education on the first floor. And this is to celebrate International Education Week. So we have flags up all around the entire atrium, which is actually kind of a square. So you see all of the various angles of the atrium, which is a wonderful way to kick off International Education Week. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Dr. Kubo.
Thank you so much, Dean Maroni. That was a nice big brush stroke of what's going on with international ed and IU School of Ed. And I just felt it was helpful with this international audience for people to know what is going on here and why it made sense with this partnership that we have with IIIT. So thank you so much. And we know you're busy and need to run, but thank you for taking your time for us today. Thank you. And now we have welcoming remarks from Dr. Elwani, IIIT.
Well, hi, everyone. Greetings from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And I don't have, unfortunately, palm trees. I should have maybe in our conference room, as it was the case with Staci. I would like to welcome all of you, the participants. Thank you very much, Dr. Kubo. And also thank you very much, Dean Staci Maroni, for giving us the opportunity at IIIT to partner with Indiana University School of Education on this important event, and our ongoing partnership actually with Indiana University through the Indiana University Press by co-publishing GEMS, the Journal of Education in Muslim Societies, and also our book series with the Indiana University Press. I don't have slides to share with you about IIIT, but I'll just go over a little bit of a background of who we are, what we have been doing, and the important work that Dr. Ilham has been actually leading at the Institute as part of our advancing education in Muslim societies. And I would like to thank Dr. Ilham also for leading this effort along with the co-partners at Indiana University. This has been an important effort for both of our institutions, and thank you very much for all you have done so far. This symposium, I would like also to thank Dr. Sharq Siddiqui, who started this effort initially with the school, with Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, in the first symposium, which was in partnership with them at the time. So thank you all. I'm not sure if he's participating in today's event, but I would like to express and extend my thanks to him too. The IIIT has been involved for many years, and since its establishment back in 1981, in supporting, sponsoring, and initiating research at the intersection of social science and contemporary Islamic thought. For more than 40 years, IIIT has collaborated with universities in the US and across the globe to work on mutually beneficial projects and mainly integration of knowledge, what it was defined at the time, and on reform of education. And education here has been defined in a formal sense through the institutions of higher ed and K-12, and also our partnerships with many other institutions, research institution of parenting, informal education, and non-formal education. IIIT partnered back in the 90s with IIUM, the International Islamic University in Malaysia, to actually implement a program in integration of knowledge, or based on the concept of integration of knowledge, to build a model of reform of higher education in Muslim societies, based on the philosophy and the conception of integration as was defined at that time by IIIT. To this day, integration of knowledge serves as the underpinning philosophy of our project in advancing education in Muslim societies, AEMS. The vision of AEMS is to initiate a conversation based on empirical and data-driven research over the issues of reform of education in Muslim societies. AEMS' first research project was Mapping the Terrain Survey, which was conducted initially in more than 17 countries. Dr. Ilham, of course, was leading that effort and can speak. And I'm sure throughout the symposium, probably you will hear some of her comments on the research that she has conducted at that time, Mapping the Terrain Survey, which was mainly to evaluate and measure values in educational systems in Muslim societies, K-12 and also college level. The basic premise of AEMS, or Advancing Education in Muslim Societies project or initiative at IIIT, is to identify universal value-based approach to advancing education in Muslim societies. Universal values were approached as or from the vantage point of the human development as a contributor to individual, group, societal levels of development. Values measured in Mapping the Terrain project were selected because of their potential contributions to human development along the spectrum of 8 states of consciousness, which we defined them based on spiral dynamic models. One of the objectives of AEMS is to establish new partnerships and collaboration, as well as to strengthen existing ones. And this symposium is one way to bring together great minds to share ideas, research studies, and wisdom on issues related to education leadership and curricular approaches, in addition to race, gender, and minority elements in education that became paramount in nowadays discussions on education and education reform. What we learned from AEMS research must stand the critical eyes of scholars in education reform and social science around the world. This is where our collaboration with Indiana University School of Education and other major institutions of learning comes to be an institutional priority for IIIT. We do this through symposia like this one, in addition to playing a role in the dissemination of its findings through our publications, jointly with Indiana University, the publications that I've just mentioned. And looking at the program of this symposium, I can see how much effort has been put into organizing it. 63 proposals were submitted, and yours, the participants, actually were the ones that have been selected for their quality, rigor, and relevancy to the symposium topic. I hope that this event will be a starting point and the first step of your involvement with us in our AEMS initiative and the Institute at large. And I would like to thank all of those who participated in this event and invite you all to be part of our initiative here at IIIT, not only during this symposium, but hopefully it would extend much beyond that into many other projects that we have planned for and to advance education in Muslim societies. Thank you very much and wish you the best of luck throughout the 3 days that are left for this symposium. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Alwani, I just wanted to thank you so much. You did such a nice job of speaking about AEMS initiative and also helping us frame the conference, frame what this symposium is about. So thank you for your thorough remarks. We really appreciate it. And now, Dr. Ilham Nasser.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed Alwani. And thank you all. For those who just joined us, this is the symposium, the 5th annual symposium on advancing education in Muslim societies. So at least you know you're in the right place. What we will do, we'll kick off the first session now. And this session will be chaired by Dr. Vafa Yunusova, who's here with us and who will introduce the speakers. And then we will run the 3 videos of all the presentations and open it for Q&A. As Daria said earlier, please feel free to field your questions in the chat. And we have a team here monitoring the chat for the first session. And then the team at Indiana University will monitor the second session. So with that, I would like to hand it to Dr. Yunusova. Please, Zoom is yours, like Daria said.
Thank you so much for giving me a floor and this opportunity to chair this session. So good day to all again who have already joined and maybe will be joining. So let me introduce myself. I am Vafa Yunusova, PhD in Education Management, graduated from Michigan State University, did have a chance to work at IU as well. So I will guide you through session 1, titled Educational Leadership, Teacher Experiences, and Refugee Integration. So this session will bring together presentations on the authentic and competitive topics such as educational leadership, teacher experiences, and refugee integration. So the first presentation will be delivered by Dr. Carrie Myrick from University of Houston, and report on examining the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on teachers' experiences in Jordan. The next speaker, Dr. Rouada Mout Yunus from University Technology Mara or MARI from Malaysia. Excuse my pronunciation, maybe I had some mispronunciation here, will be focusing on education as a platform for integration of refugees while presenting. The remaining last presentation, titled Perceptions of Muslim Women Educational Leaders on Future Education in Azerbaijan, will be done by me and my much respected colleague, Dr. Ulvia Mikhailova from ADA University, School of Education, Baku, Azerbaijan. So we will talk about preliminary findings on the qualitative research we have recently conducted. Being specific, in October, we collected the data and analyzed it. After all presentations are played, we will be proceeding to Q&A part that's going to be held by respected Dr. Ilham Nasser and Dr. Patricia Kubo. So again, thank you beforehand for joining and participating in this session. Now it's time to give floor to presenters. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Carrie Myrick. I'm the Director of the Office of Global Engagement and Special Programs in the Honors College at the University of Houston. Today, we'll be examining the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on teachers' experiences in Jordan. I'll give you an introduction to the problem, list my research questions, go through the literature review, discuss my methods and findings, and conclude. Since the onset of the Syrian refugee crisis in 2011, Jordan has played host to some 1.4 million Syrians in the country, both as registered and non-registered refugees. Roughly 1/3 of Syrian refugees are school-aged children. Jordan's population is only about 10 million, which means Syrian refugees account for about 14% of the population. At the time I conducted this study in June of 2019, the highest concentration of Syrian refugees were in the 4 northernmost governorates of Irbid, Mafraq, Zarqa, and Amman. My study took place in Amman. It was part of a larger research project. The first part of the project was a qualitative policy analysis of emergency education response interventions implemented by the Ministry of Education in the years immediately following the start of the refugee crisis in Jordan. This is an interview-based case study that looks at the teacher's perspective of how those interventions and how the Syrian refugee crisis impacted their ability to teach and their personal and professional experiences. And paper 3 was a synthesis of qualitative research that considered refugee identity and student development theory. Taken as a whole, this project highlighted the critical challenges to educating refugee youths, especially in developing nations. My research questions were, how did the Syrian refugee crisis impact teachers' personal and professional experiences? And what ways did the crisis affect their teaching? The education system in Jordan is highly complex and requires the oversight of multiple ministries. For this study, I was looking at public K-12 schools that operate under the purview of the Ministry of Education. The educational philosophy in Jordan draws heavily on the Jordanian constitution, Arab Islamic civilization, the principles of the Great Arab Revolution, and the Jordanian national experience. The foundations are intellectual, national, humanitarian, and social in nature. Jordan is committed to educating all Syrian refugee children and is party to the Education for All initiative under the SDG. Again, the first paper explored these 2 EERs. First was the elimination of compulsory pre-service teacher training, which included the lowering of qualifications for becoming a teacher from a bachelor's degree to a community college diploma. And the second was an introduction of 204 double shift and temporary schools for Syrian children, where Jordanians attended school in the morning and Syrians in the second shift in the afternoon. I did not go into this study with any type of theory or ideology in mind. I did take a grounded theory approach, but one thing that surfaced through interview analysis were these 5 components of Imam al-Ghazali's master-pupil relationship. In summary, they are show kindness and empathy and treat students as if they were your own children. Be honest and sincere, admit what you don't know, and don't give students incorrect information. Dissuade students from evil ways with care and caution and sympathy. Do not withhold advice, and teach the students appropriate to their level of understanding. Also, these 5 components of the roles of teaching through Islamic educational psychology surfaced: child development specialist, fostering children's learning, designing a safe, healthy, and appropriate environment, guiding students' behavior, and supporting families and communities. Again, this was an interview-based case study, which was exploratory in nature. I wanted to highlight the human experiences associated with the phenomenon. I was also interested in portraying people's experience in specific social contexts, and I had a particular group of people and a unique social context in mind. I recruited via snowball samples. Participants sat for 1 interview each, except for Kareem, he sat for 2. Interviews were semi-structured in nature, conducted in a closed setting with open-ended questions, and a translator was provided. In the end, I had 9 male participants with 2 to 20 years of experience. They taught across a variety of subjects. I used a grounded theory strategy. I had 5 levels of coding, starting with level 1 of open coding all the way through level 5 concept development. The dominant themes were physical spaces, learning environments, interpersonal relationships, student-centered problems, physical and mental fatigue, and sense of duty and job satisfaction. The issues associated with physical spaces have been well documented, and so I included them in the analysis only in so much as they provide context to the teacher's professional and personal experiences, mainly dealing with overcrowding, infrastructure issues, and a lack of resources. Learning environments I divided into 3 components, the first of which was shortened teaching times. With the transition from single to double shift schools, it meant class days were longer, but class shifts were shorter. So the morning shift was 45 minutes and the afternoon shift was 30. This meant that teachers were forced to choose what to teach and what to skip. Again, classes were too large to accommodate individual students' learning needs. And so as teachers fell behind in the curriculum, it created a conflict in their care ethics. Still, they tried to make learning fun. In particular, Yusuf thought it was appropriate to think on the student's level, as we find in the master-pupil relationship. And he often incorporated life skills, such as creating word problems out of students' grocery lists. Abdel preferred learning by playing and using visual aids. Still, it was up to the teachers to learn these new methods on their own. As previously noted, the compulsory pre-service teacher training had been eliminated in response to the Syrian crisis in an effort to get more teachers in the classroom at a faster rate. They did the best they could with the resources they had and to support learning and create positive environments of positive reinforcement. Prior research has linked learning environments and student achievement, ability, and motivation. So the teachers worked hard to build students' confidence. They cheered them on with clapping, and they gave them stickers when they answered questions, even if they were incorrect. They made a concerted effort to remove the win-lose situation and the fear of embarrassment from the learning environment. And by doing so, they encouraged autonomous academic motivation. And as we know, motivation and positive learning environments are essential to student development, as are strong teacher-student interpersonal relationships, or TSIRs. And teachers relied heavily on TSIRs in the classrooms, and they engaged in reciprocity, or reciprocal giving. And by this, I mean that the more the teachers gave to the students, the more the students wanted to give back, and vice versa. These behaviors seem to be innate. Again, these teachers lack the teacher training component. But they follow the Jordanian and Arab culture and are in accordance with Arab Islamic civilization facet of the education system. They also, again, reflect the teachings of Imam al-Ghazali and the tenets of the Islamic educational psychology. These teachings, as we know, Imam al-Ghazali's teachings continue to influence education in Islamic countries and are centered on the idea that education is a reciprocal arrangement. In terms of the role of a teacher in guiding students' behavior, Walid believed that if he could get students to love him, they could love education. And if they loved education, they would behave in the classroom. While Zamir resorted to corporal punishment, he never disciplined his students from a place of anger. Instead, all of the teachers practiced kindness, empathy, and mutual respect. As Al-Ghazali noted, students should respect their teachers, and teachers ought to be kind to the students. And they ought to treat them as if they are their own family. And indeed, they use familial terms when talking about their students, such as brother and son. They exhibited a high level of empathy in addressing refugee students' needs. For example, many of the refugee students were the primary income earners and did not have time for homework after school. So the teachers worked with them to complete the students' assignments in class. So basically, the teachers listened to the problems the refugee students were having. They accommodated them where they were, and then in turn, the refugee students wanted to work harder to please the teacher. This is an example of the carer listening to the needs of the cared for. The cared for completed the caring relationship by responding in turn. Still, the students' backgrounds and prior experiences did carry over into the classroom. There were gaps in learning, issues with the literacy, students placed in the wrong grade, language differences in curriculum. One of the teachers, Kareem, tried to draw from his own experiences of having a bad childhood so that he could empathize with the students' trauma, but it was not on an individuated level, nor were the teachers trained for managing the psychosocial needs of refugee students, especially when it came to dealing with the loss of a parent or family member. Also, how parents viewed education impacted the students' desire to learn. In case of Jordanian parents, they tended to be less engaged, while Syrian parents were more involved. This put extensive burden to fully developed students on the teachers. And even though this is a critical part, child development is a critical part of education, Islamic education philosophy, it led to additional pressure and stress. There were also some physical effects. The teachers talked about being exhausted and tired. They felt they gave more to the morning shift when their energy levels were higher. And this was also exacerbated by the fact that they took work home, worked on Saturdays, and had extra jobs. The psychological effects, this increased workload caused stress, or what they called self-pressure. The teachers internalized students' performance. They doubted themselves. They felt burnt out. They were angry. It affected their home lives. Some of them did have coping mechanisms with everything from spending time to friends to meditation and prayer, and that helped them some. Overall, they had a really high sense of duty. They found that working in public schools, or they believe working in public schools, kept them grounded in their communities. They saw teaching Jordanians as an obligation, but they felt that there was a sense of reward in teaching the refugees. They all thought that teaching was a respectable and high-end profession, and they connected these feelings about teaching to its historical significance in the Islamic faith. Walid understood the primary role of teachers as one that prepared students to be productive members of society, but overall they felt unappreciated by the Ministry of Education because of low salaries and lack of dignity. Even though Al-Ghazali says that teach not for the salary, but for the glory it brings to God, a lack of dignity led to the teacher strike that started in September of 2019. All of the teachers except for one had a very, very high feeling of job satisfaction. Zamir, the outlier, even though he understood that teaching was a decreed profession, he believed that the country did not have any appreciation for the teachers, and he wished he was not one. Badr said that his feelings for his students kept him going. Walid said he had a feeling of pride in knowing that he made a difference, and that was the point and purpose of teaching. He says, the teacher is the only one who leaves an imprint on a student's life, and this is mirrored in Al-Ghazali's teaching that a teacher is like a stamp to clay, and a student is like clay. If the stamp has no character, there is no impression on clay. So these themes corroborated prior research on the EER interventions I mentioned earlier. They also brought to light the side effects of these interventions, and they emphasized the role of teachers as frontline workers. The presence of the master-pupil relationship featured prominently across the themes, and it also highlighted and was paralleled by Western beliefs of TSIRs, or Western teachings of TSIRs, and this notion of care ethics and caring relations. This highlights the influence of Islamic philosophy on Western thought. So the key findings were the importance of flexibility on the part of the teachers and the value of empathy in education, and definitely a need for self-care in teachers that work in education in emergency situations. Thank you very much for your time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good day to everyone. Today I'm going to talk about education as a platform for integration of refugees, and I'll be focusing the Malaysian context. So as a brief introduction, when we talk about education for refugee children, we have to look at the rate of enrollment at the global level and also at the country level. So enrollment of refugee children in education at the global level is relatively low. You can see that at the primary level, for instance, it's about 68%. And as the child grows older, the percentage of enrollment in secondary and higher education gets lower. The situation is not so different than Malaysia. In primary schools or at the primary level, roughly 30% of refugee children are enrolled. And then at the secondary level, it drops to 16%. And you can barely count how many refugees and asylum-seeking children are there in colleges and universities in the country. So on the average, around 70% of refugee children in Malaysia are out of school. Now, the current situation in Malaysia is that the country is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention. Therefore, it does not have a clear framework to govern the rights of this group. Refugee children, therefore, are not welcome. They're not allowed even to enroll in mainstream public schools. So the need for education among this group of people is being catered to by refugee communities, NGOs, charity and faith-based organizations that run learning centers or other types of schools for these children. And to date, we have about 133, but these are the officially registered ones under the UNHCR. If you include those study schools or learning centers that are not registered, so the number could be even bigger. So refugee and asylum seekers face a number of challenges when it comes to accessing education. In Malaysia, they are generally denied access to mainstream schools, and also that makes them not able to access public examinations as well, even if they qualify for that. And then learning centers or the schools built by these refugee organizations and NGOs are usually not adequately funded, and this leads to another set of problems, which include, like teachers not being sufficiently compensated, leading to high turnover of teachers, poor physical condition, lack of infrastructure, and also inappropriate location of schools. And then also we have this problem of security and safety issues while traveling, because refugee children, just like the refugee adults, they are vulnerable to harassment and also arbitrary arrest. And of course, not to forget that we don't have robust and reliable data on refugee and asylum-seeking children who are out of school. So I would like to introduce a bit the concept of integration, because this whole study or paper that I'm working on actually talks about how and why should we look at refugee children's education from the integration lens. So integration is defined as a two-way process of adaptation, which involves two parties, the newcomer, the host society. But more specifically, educational integration is something different, and it can be understood as a dynamic approach of responding to student diversity and seeing individual differences not as problems but as opportunities to enrich learning. Now, an integration is a complex and gradual process, and it has multiple dimensions. It has legal, economic, social, and cultural dimensions. But integration is actually very important because it enables refugees to successfully integrate and also become a member of the whole society. So how does integration fit into the Malaysian context? So this is the tricky part, because since Malaysia is not a part of the 1951 Refugee Convention, it sees itself more of a transit country and not a resettlement destination for refugees and asylum seekers. Therefore, the common expectation by the Malaysian authority and also the refugee population is that they come to Malaysia to seek asylum for a short period of time before they eventually get resettled in a third country. However, the reality shows something different. If we look at data and statistics from the UNHCR website and even from the existing scientific studies, they show that the overall resettlement rate of refugee worldwide is less than 5%. Some studies quote as low as about 1 to 2%, which means every year only about 1% to 2% of refugees get resettled, despite the growing number of displaced population each year and each day. So the vast majority of refugee and asylum seekers are, in reality, likely to stay in the country where they seek asylum, in Malaysia, for instance, or they will spend long years of waiting and there is actually no guarantee of resettlement. So this paper that I'm working on is based on 3 research questions. The first one is I would like to find out from the existing body of evidence what is known and what is not known about refugee education in Malaysia that takes local integration into account. The second one is that to what extent is this reflected in existing empirical research, and what are the barriers and opportunities to educational integration of refugee and asylum-seeking children? So to answer these 3 questions, first I performed a scoping review using selected database and keywords, and then the second phase was a case study where the experiences of a local NGO called Read Malaysia were shared and discussed because this NGO had a lot of experience working with Rohingya schools for the past couple of years. And if you look at the findings, so when I performed the literature search, you can see that the total number of papers that I obtained initially was about 115, and after all the screening processes, I included about 14 papers in the end. Now, these are some of the studies that I found that actually talk about refugee education in Malaysia. However, you will see later that when I discuss the gap, whether any of them actually talks about local integration. So these are the list of the studies that were included in the final analysis. Now, some summary of findings from the scoping review is that surprisingly, none of the study actually had a focus on local integration. 4 studies did mention a little bit of integration, okay, but that was just a small part of the discussion. And most studies seem to treat or view resettlement as the final destination, as a long-term goal, and therefore did not actually consider local integration as a serious potential solution. Some of the other gaps that I found was in terms of study design, where we didn't have mixed methods study, and that the population of interest was very restricted to 3 groups: refugee children, teachers, and NGOs. And of course, another interesting thing to note is that almost half of the papers or studies were written by researchers or authors from outside Malaysia. Now, a little bit on the case study on Read Malaysia, which is a local NGO. I would actually want to focus on the challenges they faced in terms of financial sustainability, and of course the challenges of maintaining relationship with local refugee communities, and then the other challenges include whether and to what extent the NGO actually adopts digital technology to benefit refugees. And of course, the most important is whether this NGO, just like the other NGOs in Malaysia, whether they actually have a long-term vision and whether they take integration into their planning, into their daily activities and whatever programs that they support. So some of the opportunities that emerge as I was studying this NGO and its activities, first of all, zakat was one of the things that has not been fully explored. There are some opportunities there in the sense that is not being actually used in any way so far to help refugee and asylum seekers. Even though the common notion in Malaysia is that zakat funds are only for the citizen, the Muslims in Malaysia, but it's not always true. And in fact, in terms of the procedures and bureaucracies of zakat, there are actually some opportunities that we can tap into to channel or distribute some of these funds to the refugee communities. And then, of course, there are other potential collaborations which have not been fully tapped. For instance, collaborations with private schools, with local religious institutions, which are actually supportive toward refugees. And of course, in terms of programs and activities, we found that most local NGOs, and specifically Read Malaysia, has been focusing more on programs or activities that are kind of straightforward and of immediate in nature. It's not so much of long term and something that has to do with the different dimensions of integration. So, as a conclusion, local integration is actually a real and possible option. And not only that, if we think about this issue realistically, we will come to realize that in Malaysia, most refugees and asylum seekers, especially the Rohingya, are going to stay for an indefinite period of time. There is really no guarantee that they will be resettled in the near future. And even if they do, percentage is going to be very small, which means the vast majority will be in the country. On top of that, we need to also consider the fact that many Rohingya children who are the second and third generation, they are born in Malaysia and they actually know no other home than Malaysia. Many of them have been assimilated into the local language and culture. So local integration is definitely the best option for these people. We also need to have the courage to ask difficult questions and bring these difficult conversations into mainstream discourse and media. We need to have the courage to ask questions such as, why can't we integrate these children into the mainstream education system? Is our assumption that refugees and asylum seekers are temporary residents in this country based on facts and reality? And are we facing this problem with dignity, or are we actually acting indifferent, or are we actually running away from them? So I know these are difficult questions and they can be politically sensitive, but I think researchers, NGOs, advocates, and the civil society need to continuously highlight these questions and look for the solutions. And definitely we have to think of local integration as a possible pathway for refugees and asylum seekers rather than relying excessively on the hope for settlement. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions after this, I'm happy to address them. And I hope I'll be able to elaborate and provide more details on this topic in the actual paper that I'll be trying to publish. Thank you so much. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hi,
Hello,
I'm Ulvi Mikhailova,
I'm Vafa Yunusova from ADA University, Baku, Azerbaijan.
and we're happy to present our research findings to you.
So let me share the screen. Floor is yours, Zahana.
Our research was about exploring perceptions of Muslim women education leaders of future education in Azerbaijan. And here it is important to share the background of our country. Azerbaijan has passed a rather difficult and complex national development trajectory, passing through different stages of Russification, Sovietization, Westernization. We are located in a very turbulent region geopolitically, but now we are developing a new national development strategy, and education is announced as one of the 5 development priorities. And at the same time, simultaneously, debates about Islam are growing in our country, and more people, they are emphasizing the need for Islam to have own role in national development and national education development. And these female leaders in Azerbaijan, they have gained a lot of success in promoting their careers and having a voice, but still they are underrepresented at the top power levels. That's why we were hoping that this particular research will give a voice to our female leaders.
Based on what Ülviye Hanım mentioned, Azerbaijan has made gradual progress on key gender equality indicators on women's participation in decision-making. However, further improvements are needed. So, reflecting the rise in educated women in Azerbaijan, education is one of the 2 areas of employment where women have made strong progress. So, as shown in figure 3, certain fields are dominated by women, including human health, social work, education, arts, entertainment, recreation, and so on. Pay attention to figure 7. You will see that the field of education dominates women's choice when getting higher education, bachelor degrees. So again, however, being still underrepresented in the top power, female leaders may have limited opportunities in decision-making about education and role of Islam in its development. The aim of this study is to provide the opportunity to raise the voice of women leaders in education sector in Azerbaijan, and also to explore their vision of a role of Islam in a new stage of national modernization and education development. So also to explore their views of connection between leadership and Islamic identity and barriers towards their female leadership realization, self-realization in Azerbaijani society at family, societal, and organizational levels. The theoretical framework is based on whether Islam was perceived by some Western scholars as a barrier to development of nation, as a deficit or a hindrance to modernization. So we inquired how modernity and development of education in Azerbaijan will encounter with Islam. So how is reinforcement of Islam possible in education sphere? The study was guided with the following main research question. What are the perceptions of female leaders on how Islam encounters with national modernization and educational development? Literature review, we could find out that Azerbaijani cultural and religious identity was vastly transformed during the era of Russian rule. Consider women's academicians in the leadership positions. I guess they encounter numerous challenges to their progress, both personally and professionally. Generally, barriers that women moving up to senior management may be gender-based stereotypes. We applied qualitative study, and this qualitative study is mainly based on in-depth interviewing 12 the most remarkable female vice rectors, school leaders, education experts, and policymakers. Findings. Our preliminary findings show that women really because of their background, family backgrounds, respond to their question their Islamic identity in a deviative form, like in a their answers vary. For example, one of them definitely said, no, I do not define myself as a Muslim. She said that it's part of my culture, but I was raised in a Soviet family, and although it was not an atheist family, but I don't I don't have this identity. Or the second theme was Islamic authenticity or personality. For example, one of the participants mentioned that it's true that I am not an Islamic scholar, but when I set out to study this in depth, I realized that the role of women is exceptional in Islam. And as a woman, I realized that women are given great privileges in Islam, as well as great responsibilities. To the question, as a female leader, have you ever encountered any barriers? One of them, actually two of the participants mentioned that they haven't encountered any barriers, but it happened to them when they were abroad, when they were doing their studies there as PhDs, as Fulbright scholars. One of them even mentioned that, for example, in Portugal, she was the only scholar in a very small Catholic city, and she was so visible because of her appearance, and she felt like I was kind of, she mentioned that she was met with surprise.
Thank you very
Floor
much.
is yours.
Two questions are also of our big interest about how Islam can be envisioned as a part of modernization and national development in Azerbaijan. And we got several themes which are indicating that, for instance, Islam as any religion is aimed to be stable, and as any religion cannot be a driver for development and modernization of the nation. Another theme was a lot about misinterpretation of Islam, both at the national level and international levels. And it was that not Islam is a barrier to develop, but its misinterpretation is a barrier. Another theme which was identified by female leaders, that Islam must change. Islam must be reformed and adapted to the modern time. And it's really about one of the respondents even mentioned that Christianity was reformed, but Islam not. It's time for Islam to be reformed. And finally, the most interesting, I think, the concept was about that, what is modernization? And one of even two or three respondents, they mentioned that what is progress? What is modernization? Modernization is a Western concept. And this concept must be explored and defined. It's not about Islam not being modernized. It's general about East and West. And while East is referring to stay traditional. When asked about how they see a role of Islam in education development, we only got two themes revealed by participants. The first was that Islam shouldn't be a part of national education development. And citizens of Azerbaijan would bring here quotes from there, that everyone has a right to knowledge, to religious information, and so on. And we have the school subject, which provides information about all religions, and it's enough. While another theme which was revealed, stressed by respondents, that Azerbaijan is a multicultural and multi-confessional country. And we're trying to develop a country that is ready to embrace everyone, every culture, every religion. So that's why we shouldn't emphasize any particular religions through our education. But we have to deliver knowledge about to let students to consider all the perspectives and all the values from all the religions. In terms of conclusion, I think our research confirmed again the continuing secularization, this tradition of secularization in Azerbaijan. So this trend towards modernization and separation, conscious separation of state from of government and from public and private spaces, and preferring to keep a religion as at individual level. So there were two issues revealed by research participants. There are multiple interpretations of Islam, and Islam needs to be reformed. This knowledge can be shown, can be useful for policymakers in Azerbaijan and near geography.
Anything? No. Hello? I think this. Hello?
Okay, hello.
Hi,
Baba?
Patty. What happened?
What's wrong?
That was the end of
Those were the streamed presentations.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So now we're to the Q&A.
Yes, yes. Can you hear us and see us?
Yes. Mhm.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers, panelists for addressing all of these interesting, meaningful, and urgent topics. Education emergency, and of course, the issues of women is always an issue of attention, and definitely we can have a conversation about any of those topics. I want to thank our audience for fielding some questions that are very thoughtful, and of course, because of the time, we will not have all the time to field all the questions. We have our panelists here. I see Dr. Myrek and Dr. Yunusova and Dr. Yumikalova. I hope I'm not butchering your names, but thank you for being here live for the Q&A. I think we are missing Dr. Rauda. We did hear her presentation. So what we will do is focus on the questions that were posted for the two presentations, the one on the refugees in Jordan, and the second one on the women and the opinions of women, their attitudes and their thinking about Islam and women in the Azerbaijani or Azeri sample. The first question is for Dr. Myrek, that I would like to start with you. There were several questions asking about the methods that you used in your study. Did you interviewed people? Did you do observations? And maybe when you address that question, you can also address the question of the environment. What did you see there in terms of the language used in the instruction? What did you see in terms of the teachers reinforcing positive values? I guess if you can add more information about your study, there were several questions around those that I just posed for you. And thank you very much. Please, if you don't mind responding first, and then we'll move to the next study.
Sure. I was able to take note of what was coming up in the chat, so I wrote some notes as they were popping up. The question about whether or not the teachers were Jordanian or Syrian, they were all Jordanian. They were all male. That was not intentional. That was just the way that the study worked out. I did have 5 female participants enroll initially, but they decided not to participate when they learned that a Ministry of Education representative would not be present. And I didn't want an MOE representative present because I felt it would skew the data. Syrians are not allowed to become full teachers in Jordan at this moment. They can be TAs. At one point, they did employ Syrians with Jordanians and UNICEF UNICEF run schools and camps. That the Ministry of Education has since taken over most of the camp education sites, and so we don't really see Syrians as in the prominent role of teacher. They're, if they exist in schools at all, they're as a TA. Let's see, the other question about how did the teachers adapt? Most of the teachers didn't view the refugee students as refugees. Jordan has a long history of hosting refugees, from Palestinians to Iraqis to, they play host to 57 different nationalities. So they've been through these kinds of crises before. And I think that it's just ingrained in Jordanian society anyway to be very welcoming. And the teachers intentionally did not treat the students as refugees because they felt that it would put them at a disadvantage. They were flexible with them, but they didn't, they didn't purposely make them feel less than or give them any kind of treatment that would be different than what they would give to Jordanian students. Positive reinforcement was part of all of their classes. As I mentioned in the presentation very quickly, one of the things that they really liked to do with students was to work on self-esteem. So they would identify students that they knew were struggling, and they would bring them to the front of the class, have them give what they call little small speeches, talk about what they did over the weekend. They made a point to, anytime someone answered a question, whether it was correct or incorrect, they would have everybody clap for them because they felt like the effort and overcoming that fear of being wrong was more important than giving a correct answer. One of the teachers liked to put stars on his students' cheeks and noses when they did something right. So they were really going out of their way to make sure that these students felt welcome and kind of create this sense of belonging in the classroom. Let's see, I only interviewed teachers. It took me 4 months to get approval from the Ministry of Education to even interview the teachers themselves, because at the time that I was doing my study, which was, I started in 2019, they were very, very protective of who they would let have access to students in general. What they explained to me was that they had had a surge of people coming into the kingdom at the beginning of the crisis, saying that, I want to interview students, I want to interview teachers, I want to, get on the ground and see what's happening. But whether intentional or not, promises were made to people, and it ended up creating this false level of hope. And so one of the things that when I was going through my process for approval for my study, they said, we will let you interview the teachers, but the students are sacred. So hands off the students. I did get the opportunity to interview teachers in the school environment, but it was during the time of Tawjihi. And so the students were kept in a separate space. I interviewed the teachers in the principal's office one-on-one instead of being in a classroom. So unfortunately, I was not allowed to observe. And I think that was because I was an outsider. But I feel like the teachers provided enough rich data that they painted a picture of what it was like in the classroom in a way that I feel like I've got a pretty good story of it. I did get to spend quite a bit of time with the teachers, even, excuse me, when we weren't in a formal interview setting. And so I was able to understand their personalities and the way that they interacted on a regular basis anyway. And I would like to go back and be able to do another study with females, especially because I as a female, I understand that my teaching approaches are very different than males. And so I think that's one of the limitations with this study, is the fact that I didn't get that opportunity. There was a question about language. UNICEF did a really extensive study of curriculum and language differences between Syrian and Jordanian students that I did not want to replicate. So in terms of like how difficult it was for teachers, that were trying to teach to students that had previously been taught in French, it came up in the interviews, but it wasn't something that they focused on in a lot of depth, because I was also thinking about what their personal and professional experiences were like overall. So, what did the change to the double shift system mean for them? What was it like dealing with these learning gaps, and how did that kind of inhibit their ability to teach? So the language issue, like I said, it did come up, but in terms of to what extent it caused a lot of delays, they didn't really go into full depth of that because, again, that was not the purpose of this study. What was the other question? Let's see.
Just because of the sake of time, we're gonna move to our next speakers, if you don't mind, and then we'll come back to you if you go through and find one that you really have to answer. How about that?
Okay.
So for professors from Azerbaijan, there were a few questions here. One of them was asking, is this paper about gender issues or advocacy issues? And then the second question was about you're using misrepresentation. Is it wrong to present Islam, and what's the right way of using this type of terminology regarding misrepresenting or representing Islam? And then there was one that was just asked that I would like to say, that was it. And before I let you speak, please see that we have been pasting the link to the evaluations. We will do this every session. And so please make sure you take it. And then in session 2, you're going to take another one. So please, doctors from Azerbaijan, colleagues from Azerbaijan, can someone address those two questions?
I will try to start. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to tell that it's not about gender and it's not about advocacy. It's about exploring modern trends in our country. We have two trends. We have growing recognition of the value of Islam in our identity, and we are actually building it. And we also have a trend towards modernization. And we would like to see if there is any cross-cutting issues and if these two trends can go simultaneously and together. That was a main issue. And we were exploring to what extent Islam is perceived as a driver for modernization. That's why. In terms of Islamic misinterpretation, we actually used the words used by our respondents. They were constantly using, and actually, I think it is a part of this growing recognition of Islamic identity, because people started knowing and Islam more in depth, and the more they know, the more they interpret. And there are very multiple interpretation. Maybe it is our national story and how we interpret it. And there is a debate in the society about different values in Islam. I think it is growing because of this growing exploring of Islam as a part of our identity, probably. So I did not want to, it was just used by them. In terms of Islamic education, we were not touching Islamic education particularly, but probably as one of the consequences, one of the inquiries we had as a result of our research, that if we don't see a public education going together with Islam, maybe we have to strengthen Islamic education to be really a force to modernize the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your responses. And Carrie, would you like to take another question, and then we will start our next session? Please, Carrie.
Sure. I can just address, there was a question in the chat about why I had focused on Al-Ghazali instead of Ibn Khaldun or Al-Kindi. It's one of the things that this was, again, I didn't go into the study intentionally focusing on Al-Ghazali. It was one of the things that as I was listening to the teachers speak, I picked up on these, here in the West, we call them proverbs, but these little sayings that are tied to Al-Ghazali's teachings. And, I have previously taught Ibn Khaldun in a sociology perspective, and I did not find that his teachings fit exactly what the teachers were leaning toward. And the same thing with Al-Kindi, even though most of the teachers were math and science, they weren't necessarily leaning towards his philosophies. And so that's the reason that the paper focuses on Al-Ghazali more than the other two that were mentioned. And then Islamic studies, the other question was, is there formal teaching of Islamic studies in Jordanian schools? And the answer is yes, but it's not taught in a way where it's like, it's not tied to the pedagogy necessarily. It seems to be just part of the culture and the system, and therefore you present it in an innate fashion through the teachers. I don't think that they were aware that they were making these comments that happened to be tied to.
Right. Thank you so much. As a researcher myself, I cannot, not say something about your ability, both papers, the three papers, your ability to bring the voices of your participants to our symposium. I can see how important is the accuracy of representing their voices and who they are in your presentations. And of course, this is very important, specifically in countries like Jordan, where, Patty and myself, we've done research in Jordan, and we know how difficult it is to have that access. So I want to thank you, all of our panelists, for your very, very meaningful and very, very insightful thoughts about your sample, the refugees, the women in your context. And now I will hand it back to Patty so we can start the next session. Please don't forget, take 5 minutes as we transition to take the evaluation, and thank you for our audience. Stay with us. We have the next session in 9 minutes. Thank you.
I'd just like to add my thanks to the presenters. It's so refreshing to be able to hear about other parts of the world and to bring that dialogue about identity formation, about teacher experience, voice of female leaders, and certainly of students into the larger discourse that has been so dominated by Western assumptions and traditions. And I know I do work in Jordan as well, and it's just it was so exciting to get the approval from the Ministry of Education to be able to go in and focus. I did interviews with principals and with focus groups with teachers, but my main purpose of being there was the focus groups with students. So I had 383 students. And so Carrie, I was right in that period of time, right before I think there was the closing or the shutting down, and working on a book project with Rutledge on that. But it's very exciting to have students be participants in thinking through the direction of their nation. And of some of the themes too that our colleagues from Azerbaijan have been working on about what does modernization mean? What is education's role in development that partners Islam and modernization, not as binaries, but as informing one another. So I just want to thank you, and thank you for Vafa for our chair role, doing such a nice job for us and chairing the session as well. So thank you to our presenters. I'll be quiet now so that people can have time to do the evaluation form from session 1, maybe to have a little bit of a break in there, and we will see people at 1:30 soon in 8 minutes, okay? Thank you.